In the dead of night, as the lights of New York City dimmed and the noise of the day died down, a creepy darkness began to creep into the hidden corners of the city. Faced with the loneliness of subway stations and the eerie silence of deserted trains, a terrifying presence seems to lurk in the shadows, carrying stories full of mystery and menace. Threats cannot be expressed in words. Those are the hours when all your senses are challenged, and when nightmares come out of the darkness, you will feel the fear in a real and unforgettable way. Story 1: Nightmare at Night Train Station. Terrifying surveillance. My father worked as an MTA subway station manager for 35 years. His job requires a manager to be on constant duty, especially during night shifts when most trains are empty of passengers. My dad has worked most of the night shifts in his career, and although he has many funny and strange stories about these shifts, there is one story that scared him so much that he couldn't stop working. Can't forget. Late one night, around 3 a.m., as the subway moved toward his office at another station, my father boarded the train alone. The train compartment was almost empty, with only one other passenger sitting in the farthest corner. It was a tall, thin white man wearing a thick coat and a wool hat. This man not only attracted my father's eyes, but also made him feel uncomfortable by constantly glancing in his direction. Although my father tried to ignore it, his insecurity increased. When the train arrived at the next station, the man stood up and got off the train. My father did not know what this person's intentions were, but the feeling of suspense did not leave him. He decided to follow the man through the train window and noticed that the person continued to walk on the platform, seemingly following him. As the train left the station and continued moving toward his office, my father couldn't help but feel nervous. When he arrived, he hurriedly unlocked his office door and stepped inside. As soon as the door closed and he locked it, he looked through the window and saw the man in the coat still standing outside, only about 15 meters from the office door, pacing back and forth restlessly. My dad felt fear increasing, but tried to calm down and sit at his desk. Suddenly, after about 5 minutes of silence, he heard a light knock on the door. The knocking became more and more urgent, and he heard the sound of the doorknob being experimentally turned. The person outside realized the door was locked and began knocking harder, as if trying to get in at all costs. My dad felt his heart beat faster. He called out and heard a voice from the other side of the door, asking to speak. Although he couldn't clearly distinguish who it was, the voice carried a sense of tension and pressure. He replied that the door was locked and had no intention of being opened. My father knew that something was wrong, and the feeling of insecurity made it impossible for him to concentrate on his work. Although he was familiar with many strange and scary situations in his work, the tension and fear he felt that night was an experience he could not easily forget. The presence of the strange man and his constant efforts to enter the office left a deep impression on my father's mind, making him always alert during the night shifts that followed. The feeling of that man's strange presence did not subside. My father, with anxiety and tension, tried to chase the strange man away, but the knocking on the door did not stop. My father continued to work in his office, but the insecurity did not leave him. To feel more secure, he decided to check the security cameras. When he pulled up the camera screen, he found that the man in the thick coat and beanie was gone. Still, my father felt that person's presence could be a potential danger, so he worked another half hour or so in the office, always alert and worried. When he finally left the office to catch the next train, my dad quickly checked the cameras again, Verifying that the strange man was no longer standing outside the door, he went down the stairs and onto the train, trying to keep calm. As soon as the train departed, my father looked out the window and saw that strange man still standing on the platform. The man got on the same train and immediately sat down across from my father, a few seats away. Although my father tried to ignore it and look away, he felt the man's eyes fixed on him, making him feel extremely nervous. My father couldn't help but turn to look at the man, and his face showed concern. He nodded slightly and smiled, trying to diffuse the situation and appear calm. However, the anxiety did not subside. The man continued to stare at my father, constantly throughout the trip to the next station. Even though my father didn't dare turn around to look again, that person's presence made him feel like he was constantly being watched. You might wonder why my dad didn't try to do something to make the man back off. Despite his large size and strength, my father is always a gentle person and rarely shows anger. He feared that the man might be carrying a weapon, and any move he made could lead to serious danger. So my dad chose to stay quiet and keep his distance, hoping that this wouldn't make the situation worse. When the train stopped at the next station, my father almost rushed out, constantly glancing over his shoulder to check if the man was following. His anxiety was proven when the strange man continued to follow him. My father quickly looked for an open public place to hide. After searching for a while, he discovered a Wendy's was open. My father walked into the shop, chose a seat near the window, and started observing. At Wendy's, my father saw a strange man stop in front of the window, staring at him through the glass for about 10 seconds. Then the man turned around, crossed the street, and disappeared down the sidewalk. Even though he felt a little relieved, my father still didn't dare to let his guard down. After waiting a while longer and finishing his meal, he left the restaurant and continued his journey to his last train station of the night. However, the scariest part of the story happened when my dad arrived at his third office. As he was checking security cameras, panic and anxiety flared up again when he saw a strange man walking around outside the office, only about 30 feet away. The man stopped, looked up at the camera, and according to my father, he stood silently, staring at the camera for no less than a minute. At that moment, my father felt like he was being watched all the time, and his anxiety increased. Finally, the man bowed his head and walked out of the station, never to return. Although my dad didn't know whether the man continued to follow him after leaving Wendy's, the presence of that person, possibly a homeless or a dangerous person, made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Period of fear and anxiety. No one knew exactly what that man's purpose was, but this stalking left a deep impression and unforgettable fear in his mind. Story 2: Christmas Journey. Dangerous encounter on the train. 3 friends and I took a trip to New York for Christmas. In the end, we decided not to leave the city until around 2 a.m. We boarded the first train we could catch, and as expected, the train was almost empty. While we were quite alert and relaxed, suddenly there was chaos in the next train car. We looked through the glass between the cars and saw 2 hooded men, possibly teenagers, standing near a woman sitting on a chair and calling for help. I immediately suggested we go over and deal with the situation by kicking their butts, but when a friend and I looked closer, we saw that they were holding handguns. My anxiety increased. I immediately pushed all my friends into the next car, away from the armed men. When I turned around, I saw one of the men pointing at us before starting to follow. We quickly ran through at least 3 different cars, feeling the threat of danger right behind us. When the train stopped at the next stop, We quickly got off the train and ran to the nearest area where we could hide. In my haste, I got separated from my friends and had to seek refuge alone. I hastily hid behind a trash can, with increasing panic as I heard my followers' shoes stomping on the tiled floor. I realized I didn't have much time to find a better hiding place, so I peeked through the gap in the top of the barrel. I could clearly see two men, one black and one Indian, both looking very young. At this point, I was sure that they only intended to rob us until I heard one of them say, "If you find them, kill them." That statement made it almost impossible to control my reaction, and I almost pulled down the trash can as I tried to hide myself. I consider it a miracle that none of them spotted me. As they left the area, I saw they had their guns out. I then ran in the opposite direction from the two men and soon met my friends again, waving from behind a large pillar. We both hid behind another pillar not far away and waited. While we were nervous, the scariest thing was when we caught a glimpse of the woman from the train. It seemed like she walked towards the two men and called out, asking them where they were without being clear. The two men reappeared from behind a corner and walked towards the woman. The rest of their conversation is too quiet to hear clearly, but we see them walk down the stairs and back to the platform, apparently waiting for another train to arrive. Even though I called the police and reported the situation, I don't know whether those people were arrested or not. What happened next remains a mystery, but feelings of fear and anxiety still haunt us. Story 3: Horror in the Subway Late Night Stalkers. My name is Danny. I'm 22 years old, and this is the most terrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City, but don't have a car, so my primary transportation is the subway. One Saturday night, after leaving a party at midnight, I went home on the subway as usual. Even though I'm used to walking alone at night, I always feel a little creepy when going down the stairs leading into the underground without anyone around me. The train station where I stopped was particularly cramped and poorly lit. As I walked to the station, the feeling of being watched became clearer and clearer, combined with an unknown echoing sound that made the atmosphere even heavier. I arrived early to wait for the train and sat on the bench, trying to get used to the feeling like something out of a horror movie. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise and saw a man standing on the tracks, sticking his head out from the tunnel. The man looked dirty, in his early 40s, and had a creepy smile with at least 3 missing teeth. I tried not to pay attention to him, but he refused to go away. The strange laughter from inside the tunnel made the situation even more creepy. Just then, another man, looking equally disgusting, also emerged from the tunnel. This man also gave an unpleasant smile and gestured for me to go into the tunnel with them. Both men stared at me with blank eyes, as if their vision was completely locked on me. I tried my best to ignore them and just wait for the train. But in my peripheral vision, I noticed one of the men move into the tunnel, then return shortly after with a different face. The third face that appeared looked stooped and lifeless, like one of the men holding his face. The sound of the approaching train made me feel like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off my shoulders. I stood up and approached the edge of the platform, but when I saw the two men returning from the tunnel, I felt nauseous. Especially when he saw the second man holding something in his hand, a severed head. They quickly disappeared from sight as the train stopped. The train arrived, and I couldn't get out of the subway station fast enough. This experience left a deep impression and an unforgettable fear in my mind. When my train finally moved out of the station, I quickly boarded the first car with the intention of warning the conductor. I couldn't wait another second. I just wanted to leave that area as soon as possible. As the train started rolling, I saw feet moving down the stairs leading to the platform. I didn't know exactly who it was, but the feeling of insecurity made me shiver. As the train entered the tunnel, I caught a glimpse of a group of men hunched over, leaning against the railing, just inches from the train windows. They all looked straight at me, their eyes lifeless and scary. I couldn't keep calm any longer and knocked on the conductor's door like a crazy person. I shouted that it was an emergency, and when the conductor opened the door, I quickly explained what I had just witnessed. The conductor immediately called someone in charge of the station and contacted a company superior. I'm not sure what they did after that, but I hope they alerted the authorities or security forces. I had to wait a long time for the next stop, and when the train finally stopped, I felt so relieved I couldn't believe it. Instead of returning to the nearby station, I decided to walk a longer distance to the next station, even though I missed my original stop. This experience made me wonder if such strange things often happen in the subway at night. Before this incident, I had never experienced anything similar, but after this terrifying experience, I feel the need to emphasize that you should be extremely cautious when in isolated places such as subway station late at night. When dawn breaks and sunlight dispels the remaining shadows, the horrifying memories of those late-night hours do not disappear easily. Stories from terrifying encounters on the subway and dangerous journeys become indelibly imprinted on the minds of those who experience them. Sometimes, fears are not what you see, but the haunting feeling of a mysterious presence that always follows you. And when you think you've escaped them, the darkness is still there, waiting for the next moments to make you feel scared again.